Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of pianoTV. I am Allysia, your host, and today I thought it might be fun. We haven't talked about books in a while, and I know you guys are always interested in discussions about books. So I thought that I would... My desk, I'm glad you can't see it. It's a total mess. I teach currently somewhere in the ballpark of 50 adults just via correspondence every week. And as such, I always have just a bunch of books strewn everywhere. And there tends to be books that just permanently live on my desk because I'm always using them, like almost every single day, because so many of my students are using the pieces in them. So what I thought might be kind of fun would just be grab I didn't even like sort through this. This is my pile. It's a total mess. Nothing's organized, and I haven't predetermined what I'm going to say about any of this, but I thought it might be fun to just grab my pile, sit down, and talk about what people are learning. So the RCM books are ones that I always use. So just off the top, I already see like there's 4 RCM books. I have level 1, 2. I know there's level 5 in here somewhere. There's book 5. And this is, so for those of you who are watching this, who are my current coaching students, you'll probably recognize some of the books that we work with in here. And you're like, hey, that's me. I'm doing that book. There's probably multiple of you. So all the RCM books that I have on the go right now, pretty much everything from level 1 to 5, because the reality is that as a piano teacher, it doesn't really matter who you are as a piano teacher. You're generally going to be teaching people more in the beginner to intermediate stages, just because people drop off. A lot of beginners start and then just stop. A lot of people will kind of get to that grade 3 level, then they'll stop. So less people make it to the very end, to the more advanced level. So those are kind of more rare students. So I always have some of the early level books. I've talked about the RCM books a ton. I do really like them. They have a nice diverse range of pieces. So in the RCM books, everything is divided by grade, by category. So list A, list B, list C, which is all based by era. So the list A stuff is going to be Baroque, list C stuff is going to be classical, and then list C is Romantic, 20th and 21st century. It's a little bit different with the earlier grades, but that's the gist of it. They usually have a solid collection of pieces, and I have students who some of my more hardcore students like to work through most of the pieces in one of these books at any particular grade level. Some are just kind of dabbling. Some are doing exams, so that's a bit. That was a big chunk of books, and that was a really loud, dramatic. And some of them I didn't mention also. Some of them are working on the Etudes. I think that no matter who you are, if you're working with the RCM or not, I think the Etudes books are really worth picking up. Etudes are just exercises, so they're studies. Essentially, and this is what I like about them. This book has 17 Etudes, which is a lot. Like, you wouldn't work through all 17. I try to get through a lot of them with my students, like traditional students, but not learn all of them really well. Maybe learn 5 of them very well. Most of them just kind of trying them out to expose them to new repertoire. But what I like about the Etude books is it tells you exactly what you're studying. So with Burgmüller's Arabesque, your leggero touch, so a light and fast touch. With, Lorna Patterson's Rush Hour. This is actually a really cool piece. Rhythmic control and hand coordination. So it tells you exactly the learning points of each of these etudes so that you can focus on developing those techniques. So even if you're not working with the RCM series, these are really great books to use because everything's at the same level. So as long as you have a kind of general sense of what level you're at, then I find they work really well. If you don't know what level you're at, pick up one of the easier ones because it never hurts to learn some easy music. Pick up the grade 1 book. I have the Piano Adventures book. None of my students are in the first Piano Adventures book. There's a lot who are in the second, though, which is interesting. So this is one of my most well-known method book series. I also think there's an Alfred in here somewhere. There's Alfred book 1, which I use with a lot of students as well. These are what I would consider kind of 2 of the more common adult method book series. I think they're both good for different reasons. I do usually use Piano Adventures more now. I used to use Alfred more back in the day. So I kind of have a familiarity with it, but they're both good. Alfred's better for learning chords, but it's more hand position based, and Piano Adventures is maybe a little bit better of a gateway into classical music, but A lot of my students tend to use those regardless of whether or not I recommend them specifically. They just seem to be pretty common. Oh, I do have an ABRSM book on the pile. I don't know why the grade 2 one is, because I usually use the grade 3. I'm using the grade 3, 4, and 7 books currently right now too, so I don't know why they're not in the pile, but these are kind of like the RCM books, but they're smaller. So instead of having, I don't know, something like 20, probably the RCM books probably have like 20 pieces per book. These ones have 9 in every book, so they have 3 per category. Less selection, but they're really well curated, and as with the RCM, they're all kind of based on like everything's all at the same level. So the grade 2 books, all the pieces are going to be relatively the same difficulty, which is great if you're wanting to pick music that actually makes sense for you, if you don't want to have to just like constantly figure out what you're supposed to learn and if it's the right level. Oh, yeah, another series that I'm sure the first book is in this pile somewhere. I don't see it. That's unusual. Oh, there it is. Okay. Christopher Norton's Connections. I'm kind of bummed out because these seem to be getting a little bit harder to find. Usually I buy everything on Sheet Music Plus, and yeah, these aren't currently available on Sheet Music Plus, so they must have been shifting publishers or something. These are such good books. They're graded just like the RCM and the ABRSM books. So if you're using book 4, everything's going to be roughly at a grade 4 level, which is wonderful because, again, it takes out a lot of the guesswork. But the thing that I really like about these books is they're contemporary. So you have pieces that are let me just see, like Latin pieces. You have character pieces, which are more like just kind of after the rain, or you know, pieces with expressive titles like that. There's swing, there's jazz. Lyrical pieces would be kind of more romantic style. So it's basically great sounding music that's contemporary, which is a good alternative to ABRSM and RCM stuff, which is very well, it has modern music too, but it does focus a little bit on the classical stuff, which isn't to everyone's cup of tea. That was the worst. That was the worst. Let us never repeat another experience of creating an accent. Beethoven. Let's shift the subject here. So we're getting away from some of the methods. Beethoven's Dances for the piano. There's a lot of great intermediate level dances. The ones that I tend to use the most are his 12 German dances, Woo 13, WO 13, and his Ecosse in G, which is WO 23. Those are pretty common too. There's another, I think those are the main sets that I tend to use, but this is a solid book if you're wanting to do Beethoven, but you're not able to play, his more difficult music like his bagatelles or his sonatas or his sonatinas, which are all pretty like advanced level. So good gateway Beethoven. Schumann, Album for the Young. I've talked about this a lot on the channel. This is basically grade 3 to 7 romantic music. It's, a lot of it's actually really, really difficult. Even the grade 3 level pieces are difficult for being grade 3. So, but it is good. Like this is one of the, I actually think, do I have Tchaikovsky's here? Yes, I do. Tchaikovsky has an equivalent album, which is Tchaikovsky's Album for the Young. Exact same name, exact same difficulty. I'd actually say that Tchaikovsky's is a little easier. Not all the pieces are easier, but it starts a little bit easier than Schumann's, I think. So, but they both cover a lot of the same turf. They're romantic-ish. They've got a lot of really expressive pieces. So before you're able to really dig into Chopin and stuff like that, these are good collections that I like learning at least several of with my students. I think these are great to just read through the whole thing. Again, not to master every single piece, but to just explore. Bach's 2 and 3-part Inventions. These are more high level. These are grade 7, 8 level. So most of my students aren't. This is a really old book, by the way. This came from like my mom's piano music stash. Sorry, Mom, I just said it's a really old book and it came from your stash. I did not mean anything by that. My mom's not watching this. What am I saying? I've talked about this a lot on the channel. Kabalevsky's Opus 39, 24 pieces for children. I teach it to adults pretty much exclusively. I almost never use this with kids, interestingly enough. But this is a really great book to work through. It starts at a preparatory level and quickly kind of advances through all the way to about a level 5 or a level 6. So I usually like working through about the first 10 to 15 pieces with people until they usually start getting a little bit more difficult. But this is one book that I would encourage my students. So if you're an intermediate student, I would work through even the beginning pieces because there's really good skills you can develop here. I use this with, I would say, at least half of my students. So that's probably one of the most important ones. Another book that I use with a lot of people, I pull out, this book is getting really battered. It's well loved. Essential Keyboard Repertoire Volume 1. This is basically a big collection of classical music. So if you don't want to, buy a bunch of books like a Bach and a Mozart and everything else, this is just kind of an all-in-one thing. I don't usually like collection books, but I use this one a lot. It has Anna Magdalena Bach. I use those pieces a lot. It's got some Gerlit, which I sometimes use. It has some Beethoven, which I use. There's some Schumann from his album From the Young. And there's some Schubert. Basically, everything here is from a preparatory to about a grade 5 level. So this is good, even if you're sort of in the starting phases, if you want to explore some of the more classical style repertoire. And another one I talk about all the time on this channel. Bartók's Microcosmos 1. Again, probably more than half of my students are currently going through this or have gone through this. It's like a more old school style method book. It's so good. It's good for sight reading if you're pretty advanced. You can go through like 1, 2, 3. Like you can, if you're an advanced student, you could just read through a bunch of these. But yeah, I use Microcosmos all the time. Martha Meyer's Jazz, Rags, and Blues. Solid. I recommend this to, I think this is in my grade 1 book collection roundup. A lot of my students use these. For the same reason as Christopher Norton, she writes music that beginners-ish can play, but sound really sophisticated. They sound much more snazzy than the level implies. I have Edward Grieg's lyric pieces. I use this one a lot personally, so that's one of the main reasons this one's out. It's his complete, so it's a big fat book of lyric pieces. Great for the late intermediate student. Bergmüller's 25 Etudes, Opus 100. I like, ideally, like the perfect student for me, the intermediate level student will go through all of these. These are great studies. It's like the RCM books, the Etude books, but instead of being everything at the same level, they're all kind of at different levels between about grade 3 to 7. But it's a book you can use for many years. Like if you learn a few of the Etudes every year as you progress, then eventually you get through the whole book. It's just great. I really prefer this, honestly, to a lot of the Czerny books I have for developing technique. Clementi's Sonatinas, yes, especially his Opus 36 number 1. It's a very, very well loved. It's like the Stairway to Heaven of classical music. It's just, everyone has to learn it. It's like a gateway. You're not a piano player until you've tried his Opus 36 number 1. All 3 movements I usually encourage my students to do. And then Chopin's Waltzes, because almost all of my, no, that's not true. All of my more advanced students have or are thinking of doing his waltz in A minor. I've had a ton of students who've learned that piece. It's just a really famous, lovely, wonderful piece. It's one of the first Chopin pieces I tend to teach. So it's a grade 6 level. It's like entry Chopin, but it's quite difficult. There's a lot of nuance and stuff in it. But anyway, that's my pile. It is now, I've just been like throwing things to the side, so my pile is not contained. It's like a big mountain on the floor now. But yeah, those are my most used books in my studio. It's a good blend, like I said at the beginning, of stuff that's for beginners versus stuff that's for people more at the intermediate level. I think there's only 1 or 2 books. Like the Grieg lyric pieces and the Bach Inventions are probably the most advanced books in that pile. But for the most, I guess Chopin's Waltzes are pretty difficult as well, except for that one particular one. But yeah, that's a lot of the music that I listen to on a weekly basis, then that I love teaching. So hopefully you found this video maybe a little bit helpful. I'm always a little bit of a music book pusher, so maybe I'm like, pushing you to buy some buy some new music books and improve your collection. And in that case, job well done. No, I don't know. I'm just like an obsessive music book collector. So anyway, that's my pile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. This is a heavy pile. It was a heavy pile of books.